And we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Wheelie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Atoll, and I'm joined again by Electrek's Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Awesome. And we have a bunch of interesting and diverse e-bike stories to talk about this week. Everything from new e-bikes, got something interesting from a UK-based e-bike maker. Dahon just launched their IPO, one of the few bike makers that has actually gone public. LiveWire is having a fire sale. I shouldn't call it a fire sale, a very good sale. And a bunch of other interesting two-wheeled news. So where are we going to start with this week, Seth?
All right. British company unveils non-folding electric bike that folds flat.
Yeah, a bit counterintuitive, but this is a really neat e-bike because it's just very different from what we're used to seeing. And I love that because I feel like every day there's another cookie cutter launch. So this is a company called Boost. And what we're looking at here, I'll try my best to describe it if you're just listening to the podcast, is a 20-inch, almost sort of BMX looking e-bike. So it's got these smaller 20-inch wheels. And it's not a folding bike, but they've got this interesting mechanism in the handlebars that swivel them 90 degrees without turning the fork. And then you add to that the folding pedals, and the bike gets super narrow. So for like apartment dwellers or anyone who just has a minimal amount of space and they want an e-bike still, this would be a really cool bike that you could tuck like behind a couch or in a hallway, and you don't like catch your waist on the handlebars every time you go by, which something happens to me all the time. So it's a really neat way to sort of get the advantages of a folding bike without needing the extra weight and cost and complexity and like lack of rigidity that generally comes with folding bikes. This is a new bike. I don't think we have an exact price yet, but it's been estimated that it's going to be, I believe, around $1,700, something like that. So not very cheap, especially considering this is a fairly low power, EU legal e-bike, right? So we're talking 25 kilometers per hour. That's 15 and a half miles per hour, 250 watts. Though I'm guessing it goes a little bit more than that. And to be honest, it sort of looks like one of those bolt-on e-bike kits, which probably makes sense because Boost, before they made full e-bikes, made e-bike conversion kits. So they've sort of like parlayed their kit into this cool design for a lightweight urban bike. And so this is certainly, like a niche product. Not everyone's going to be into such a small bike, smaller wheels, narrow tires. But for those that want something really lightweight, this I think could fit the bill. I described it as sort of being after the market of something like the Jackrabbit bikes, but unlike those, this is truly a bicycle in that it
With
has
pedals
functional
and gears.
pedals. Exactly. Yeah. So, I think it's really neat. Obviously, it's going to be a bit underpowered for what a lot of us are used to. But for a, EU legal type of e-bike, I just think it's fun to see new things and to not have the same e-bikes come out over and over and over again. What do you think, Seth?
Love it. It kind of also reminds me of that the very light bike space, like Carbo. Those bikes that are electric, but you can still lift them over your head with one arm.
Right.
Like very minimalist. What is the weight on this one?
I'm not sure that we had a weight on this one yet because it hasn't been officially like launched yet, I don't believe. So
The frame is aluminum, so that's going to be light, but not like carbon fiber light.
oh yeah, definitely. And with this price, you'd start to think maybe is it carbon?
Right. I also like the look. It's got, for those listening, it's got fluorescent, I guess,
The
rims on the
rims.
wheels
Yeah.
that look good. And it's, it's a bike. It's not like, the Jackrabbits of the world. So you are going to be able to pedal this. It's going to be all the bike people aren't going to lose their minds that you're, in the bike lane with a scooter. So I like the idea. There's a picture in here with it kind of behind a doorway, which I think is a perfect use for this kind of bike. And because it's a 20-inch wheels and smaller frame, you're going to be able to put that in a car pretty easily. Just slide it in and maybe even stack a couple because it's so narrow frame wise, and that has that handlebar thing. I feel like the handlebar thing should be more ubiquitous, like being able
Definitely.
I mean, for packing and for storing bikes, having a handlebar that goes, makes it two-dimensional, really helps out.
Yeah, because that's the most annoying thing. Is just always getting stabbed by the handlebars when you walk by.
Yeah, and folding pedals aren't anything new. It's obviously it makes sense here, um, but yeah, I think this is a great use case. Like I'm sure whoever's behind this bike was like, why can't we just have a two-dimensional bike when it's so great to see, and I hope we get a review at some point. Are they going to be UK only or global?
Probably for when they start, or at least in Europe. I can't imagine that bike is going to have a huge audience in the US just because of the EU specs.
Well, it'll be easy to transport overseas if you
Yeah,
need to get
definitely.
one.
And they
All
make
right,
a non-electric version, so you can bring it on a plane if it's the
there you go.
non-electric.
Yeah, it looks like that battery might be removable as well. All right, moving on. Dahon marks huge
Dahon, yeah.
marks huge IPO as investors jump for leading folding bike maker.
Yeah, this is a neat one because we rarely ever see bike companies go public. And so Dahan just went public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And it's a neat opportunity, one for us, because we get to actually get some insight into the company's financials. Lots of times these companies are very opaque, right? Like
Yeah,
we're all real curious, how much money is Electrek making? How much money is Rad making? But you're rarely ever going to get that information from all these private companies. Now with the ongoing public, we can actually look inside the books. And so here they're telling us last year they did something like I think it was like 62 million dollars US dollars in revenue, a little over $7 million in profit, and we actually get to see real figures from these companies, or at least in this case from Dahan. We've covered Dahon a bit more in the last few months. We've seen several news items from them. They've launched a bunch of new e-bikes, which is fun because for a while they've been a leading folding bike maker. They didn't invent the idea of folding bikes. I mean, I think the first folding bike patent was like 100 years ago or something, but they're fairly well credited for making folding bikes so commonplace. In the 80s, they really revolutionized how folding bikes worked. And this is when, I think Brompton was around in the 80s, but they were still much smaller. This was before like the Brompton wave. And so Dahan deserves a lot of credit for a lot of the design and the innovation that has gone into folding bikes. A lot of it, I mean, the company sold, a lot of the stuff is no longer protected. The patents have come into the public domain. So you'll see a lot of Dahan's early designs on other companies' folding bikes. And so this is not, some new company. They get a lot of credit for driving the folding bike industry to where it is today. And now to see a bunch of interesting folding electric bikes coming out from the company, everything from like super lightweight to big folding tricycles with like huge cargo boxes, is really interesting. And so I'm excited to see into the future what we can learn about the company's financials. And then perhaps this is a sign of things to come with more companies. Obviously, it's a great funding opportunity. So if a company is looking to, expand their books and get a lot of funding, going public is a way to do that. There's of course some risk involved. You're giving up a piece of your company to do this, but it could be attractive for a lot of companies looking for that, cash infusion. Now there is some risk there, like when Saunders was looking to go public. A lot of people say that's part of what led to their downfall. So this isn't a piece of cake, but this is not some fly by night company. It's not a new startup. Dahan knows what they're doing. That's Dr. Han there on the left. He's the guy that founded the company. I actually got to interview him when I was in Shenzhen late last year. So it's really cool to see them taking this public and getting a deeper look into the financials here, which I think is going to be fascinating, especially since we're in this sort of weird phase of the bike industry where
yeah,
we're still feeling the pains of the post-pandemic high, and we're seeing recovery, but it's very uncertain. Some companies are doing well, some companies, you're wondering what's going on. So hopefully this
and
leads to more transparency in the industry.
yeah, with tariffs and the legal landscape and everything, it's very tumultuous. I find it interesting that the Hong Kong exchange, they have a gong instead of
Yeah.
the bell that they have at the New York Stock Exchange. I
How cool
guess,
is that, right?
yeah, I guess you just you hit the local instrument of some sort.
Yeah. It's the Scottish Stock Exchange. They whip out the bagpipes.
Yeah. And also, this guy looks like that's
That's Dr. Han. Yeah.
Dr. Han. He looks to be an eccentric fellow. Uh, with the bow tie and for those listening, he's does seem to have like a shaved side of his head. Like, doesn't seem like a typical what you would expect from a
He's an out of the box thinking kind of guy.
right.
Yeah, and I think his style reflects that. When I met with him, he invited me to his home, and I had the chance to interview him. And he had this like incredible smoking jacket he was wearing. It was like this like huge fluffy, like
Still,
it was so cool. Yeah, so like, he definitely has a style to him. That's for sure.
that's cool. It's good to see the founders doing their founder thing.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here. My back button doesn't seem to be working. Weird.
Only forwards.
That's weird. I think maybe our ad system is refreshing our page or something. All right, moving on. If you don't know which type of e-bike to buy, you should probably get this one, bearing the lead.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make it really easy for the many people that email me and are like, I've got 20 tabs open, there's 1,000 e-bikes, I don't know how to choose one. If you just have no idea which type of e-bike to get for you, I can tell you what's probably the correct answer. And it is a 20-inch folding e-bike. I would say that for 80% of people looking for an e-bike, a 20-inch folder, especially one with fat or semi-fat tires, like 3-inch tires, is kind of like the sweet spot in my opinion. This will fit the vast majority of people that are getting into e-bikes and are like, I just want something that will do like a bunch of things pretty well. If you have super specific needs, like you're always moving cargo, then you get a cargo bike. If like you're riding single track, then you get a mountain bike. But if you just want one e-bike that can do sort of everything, a 20-inch folder is that, because it fits just about everything that people would want to do with an e-bike. So I've listed a few examples here, but there are many of them. These are sort of like the US based companies here. So things like the Electrek XP, the Velotric Fold, Aventon Cinch, and the Ride One Up Portola are like the big four when it comes to like the major US based folding fat tire bikes. But for like, if you can think of a job you want to do with an e-bike, it can probably be done here. So like, let's say you want to bring kids, almost all of these will have load bearing racks, either as part of the frame or like heavy duty mounted racks. So you can put a kid seat back there. A lot of them come with passenger packages, so you can carry a second adult. Pretty much all of them are going to have at least front suspension. That's the other thing. I recommend getting a front suspension 20-inch folder. There are some full suspension ones. They get heavier, they get more expensive, but generally speaking, a front suspension is going to be good enough for most people, especially the fat tires, because you can take it on, like a nature trail, a gravel path, just as well as you can take it on an asphalt bike lane. If you're watching along with us there, you saw a GIF of me like putting it in a vehicle and taking it out. That's one thing that's just so nice about a folding bike, is that while some people will just never fold it, the ability to once in a while stick it in like just about any vehicle, it will fit in a lot of trunks unless the car is like tiny. Certainly any like hatchback. Even if you have like a small sedan, there's a good chance that folded it will fit in the back seat. And for a lot of people, even if you just fold the handlebars down, it makes it short enough to like slip down the tunnel in the middle of like an SUV or a minivan sort of thing. So the folding is a huge part of it. The off-road ability, the smaller form factor, for a lot of people that are getting into e-bikes, maybe you haven't ridden in literally decades, and so you want something that you can put your feet on the ground. It doesn't feel tall like a Dutch bike, or doesn't feel big like a mountain bike. It feels more like a seated scooter almost, where you can easily put your feet down. That's something you can do more easily on a 20-inch folder, because they generally have frames that are a little more stretched out, a little bit lower, just kind of comfort oriented, as opposed to efficiency oriented, like a hybrid or like a city bike or a metro bike. So in my opinion, and from answering like a ton of people that ask me what type of bike they need and I ask what they want to do with it, most people just want a sort of does everything pretty well as opposed to does one thing amazing. This is the style of bike that does almost everything you could want. And like I said, like it's not going to fit everybody, right? There are use cases where someone's like, every day I need to carry like 400 pounds of cargo to the market to like sell all of my produce. So maybe this is not for you, then maybe you need like a cargo trike. But for most people, this is going to do it. Seth, I think you've got a 20-inch folder in Vermont, don't you?
Yeah, I've got a hay bike in Vermont. I've got a Luna Eclipse here in New York, and I think I have a Himaway as well. I don't think that's a folder though. It's just still the 20-inch form factor. It's a little bit
Right.
earlier. I was actually surprised that the Rad, I guess not the Rover, but the Rad Fold didn't make the cut.
The Rad Expand. Yeah, it's a good
Expand.
point. So they used to have the Mini. They discontinued that a few years ago, replaced it with the Rad Expand. That's a good point. I forgot about that one. Though the fact that I forgot that it exists is perhaps says something
Not a great,
about yeah, about how often you see it out there or the state of the company or something. But
right.
yeah, that probably deserves to be on the list just because Rad has, been a huge factor, even if they don't hold the place in the market that they used to. But that's another good example of a 20-inch folder, the Rad Expand.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm just kind of going through my memory bank of like all the folders I've had. There's like the Saunders fold was like one of the early ones out there, but obviously Saunders is no longer in existence. Um, yeah, I definitely. I mean, I think most people would end up buying an Electrek XP4. If you're more bike shop people, Aventons in more places. Portola's got some nice features, and the Electrek is around as well. So all good options there. The other thing is like if you're a street rider and you kind of want to blend in with the other bikes, there's a lot of the Luna Fix. There's a bunch of bikes that kind of hide their electric nature. So that's just like another field. But what's interesting, I think, is that before Electrek was a thing, this wasn't a big form factor. I think the electric motor has made the 20-inch wheels. I mean, obviously BMXs existed, but for adults, a lot of people didn't have this form factor.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was the original Electrek XP that really like woke people up to the idea of a folding fat tire bike. Um, Outside of the US, they've long been a lot more popular. Like in Tel Aviv, where I live, I would literally say probably 95% of the e-bikes I see are 20-inch folding bikes. There's a bike shop on the ground floor of my building, and I don't think they have one full-size wheel bike in there. They have pedal bikes that are, like 26-inch, 700C. But of the
Right.
e-bikes, I think they're all 20-inch. They even have an electric trike there I see when I walk by in their lineup, and also 20-inch. So it's just like for people who live in a city, I think that the smaller wheels, the more compact nature, they've long been a big draw. And I think that Electrek does deserve credit for 5 or 6 years ago, whenever that was. I think it was 2019. Bringing that first XP4 over and showing the US like this actually works really well. Give it a chance.
Yeah, and we've talked in the past about how folding is not just good for moving your bike around, like traveling or whatever, but it's also good for shipping, which saves money and all the other stuff. So it has become the kind of Goldilocks. And when people do ask about electric bikes, I automatically assume they're going to want a 20-inch. So interesting the way the e-bike world has kind of turned. Moving on. Oh God, a new plan will allow NYPD to confiscate electric bike batteries. Great.
Yeah, so it's as if like they know our podcast schedule and they want to make sure that New York gets at least one story on every podcast, because we always have, unfortunately, a new like New York City crackdown story to talk about. The latest one is, and this is not finalized. It's a plan that's been promoted, and they're going to be discussing it later this month, I believe, to vote on. But the idea is that the police department would be given the right to confiscate non-UL compliant batteries. There's not a lot of detail on how this would work. Is it like a like the e-bike version of stop and frisk. Like we don't really know. They're going to go door to door, like checking for UL stickers. But the idea is that following the law passed in 2023 for New York, that you could only sell UL certified e-bikes or e-bikes with UL compliant batteries. Now they want to get rid of all of the non-UL compliant batteries that have already been there, or maybe the ones that have sort of like, snuck through the border, so to speak. And the basis of this, of course, is the idea of safety, right? That UL compliant batteries are theoretically going to be safer because they go through all the testing standards, that sort of thing. This is generally true. Now, there are multiple places where you can get your UL certification. You don't have to be certified by UL. There are other testing labs that are able to certify to UL standards, that UL is like giving them that right. There are also ways that you can just buy a certificate, that isn't actually for your bike. Like it's possible for Chinese companies to just like, or anybody to just like get basically a counterfeit certificate applied to your bike model. So just because it says UL doesn't necessarily mean it is, but generally speaking, if it is UL compliant, it is going to be safer. And New York City, of course, is this epicenter of e-bike concern around e-bike fires, because there have been more in New York City than other places, largely based on the fact that there are simply more e-bikes there. They're very, very common among the deliveristas that do like food delivery and courier riders, that sort of thing. And there have been programs instituted where the New York DOT trades out delivery riders' older non-compliant batteries with UL batteries. So I mean, there are good things that have happened in part of this like crackdown as well. It's not all like draconian measures. This one is a little bit worrying because I'm not sure how it gets implemented. Like there are like illegal search and seizure concerns to consider here. Like there are some constitutional rights that have to sort of be figured out how this works into. The other thing is that just like when the e-bike classes came into existence, around a decade or so ago, and suddenly people would go online and buy like a 750 watt sticker, or in Europe you get like a 250 watt sticker and you just like stick it on your motor. Are people just going to be able to get UL stickers and put them on their batteries? You're going to start buying UL stickers on Amazon. So
I was actually thinking the opposite. Like, maybe treat batteries like cigarettes and just put like, a bike fire sticker on
oh gosh,
the side of the, you can have this battery, but you just have to look at a bike fire every time you look down at it, or you
oh
have to look at
geez.
like, a bunch of, a skeleton of a house that burned down because of an e-bike or something.
Oof, yeah. Hopefully that's not the way it goes. Yeah, or your neighbors have to look at the sticker too every time you charge it.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think the better thing is like obviously everybody should be educated on good e-bike batteries. What's unfortunate is like the batteries that aren't UL certified are often on bikes that are very affordable, like Amazon bikes or AliExpress bikes that are $200 or $300 or $500 or whatever. And of course, why are they so cheap? Because they've cut out the important safety parts of the process. So
yeah.
I don't know how to I don't know how New York gets around that issue, or how they make that right.
Yeah, and there is like the basis of this is a good idea. And actually, I see there's a comment from Carl in San Diego I want to address here as opposed to hitting it at the end. That first of all, it is a good idea to get these non-safety compliant batteries off the street, but that is not what he says is it's not good enough to just ban new sales. You have to get the old ones out as well.
Right.
I will actually say that if you look at the fire and or especially the injuries and lethalities data, and I think if you scroll down a little bit in the article, I've got it after the second picture. Since 2023, when they instituted a new law against selling non-UL compliant batteries, there has been a sizable reduction in both e-bike fire injuries and deaths.
That's great.
So yeah, we're actually seeing, what from like 2020 through 2023, a year to year increase, and sometimes a sizable increase. Since 2023, the numbers have gone the other way. So we're seeing a reduction in fire injuries and deaths. And, certainly there's, correlation does not imply causation situation here. I'm not saying this is all from the UL or the non-UL e-bike battery ban, but the fact that it happened the same year and we saw a drastic cut in fires, I think indicates that there is some significant component to this. And so I am all about people choosing to go with a UL certified battery over a non-UL certified battery. There are some issues here with how we like confiscate non-UL batteries, and so there's some details that need to be worked out. But in general, I think that there is, you know, a good basis to this. It's the implementation that is going to be the tricky part.
Yeah, I mean, maybe all this noise that they're making with all these announcements is kind of educating people as well. And you know, the publicity around bike fires is making, you know, some kid brings a new e-bike home and their mom is like, that thing's going to catch on fire, leave it outside. So it might be something, or even smarter stuff like, you know, leave your bike battery in the oven, or, you know, whatever. So whatever it is, it's working. And, you know, obviously, like, even the cheap batteries are being built better now, because we're learning what catches fire and what doesn't. And, you know, the factories that are theoretically not getting UL certified are selling an inferior product, and they're not getting as much money for it. So that's capitalism happening a little bit. A lot of good reasons, and the benefit is that fewer and fewer fires are happening. So that is good news. So good for New York. All right, let's move on. Review. I tested the Viribus SC5 fat tire electric trike, and it's more capable than I expected.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I've always found the lower end of the e-trike market to be fascinating because it opens the door to a lot of seniors who don't have, you know, thousands of dollars for an e-trike, despite e-trikes being like a perfect way for seniors to get out and get riding again, because they remove the issue of balance, of, you know, worrying about tipping over on a, you know, 50, 60, 70-pound bike and getting hurt, that you can just, you know, slow to a stop and you never have to put your feet down. The problem is, you know, they're just very expensive. Like Electrek, again, deserves credit. They brought in the first $1,500 e-trike, or the first major one, and that opened the door to so many people that couldn't afford the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 ones. Since then, we've seen more e-trikes like this one from Viribus. This one is, I think, $1,299, and it just makes it even more accessible to people on fixed income. You know, like every month they've got a small Social Security check, and this is a little bit closer to something that they can actually afford. Now, obviously, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. You're going to have to cut some corners to get that affordable. And so that's what I wanted to see with this bike. And I can tell you right away a few of the, like, you know, cut corners. It's got a front hub motor instead of that sort of mid-mounted hub motor that we see on a lot of trikes. On flat, dry ground, it doesn't make a lot of difference. If you're going over like wet leaves, wet grass, going up a hill, that's where sometimes you'll have some traction issues. You can have that front tire spin sort of thing. So something to keep in mind. Also, this one has mechanical disc brakes. It doesn't have the hydraulic brakes, which generally speaking, I recommend people go for hydraulics. But on a trike, I believe it's even more important because you're stopping more weight. And so having more powerful brakes is always going to be a benefit. Plus, again, the biggest market for trikes are older riders. And so the fact that hydraulic brakes do not require as much maintenance is a good thing, because, like, I can't imagine a lot of people's grandmas getting down there with like a 5mm Allen and like tuning their brakes. Not that they couldn't, but, like, you know, it's not like a common thing that I can imagine like a grandma doing for herself. So less maintenance, always a good thing when you're talking about bikes for older riders. Other than those two main things, this is actually a pretty nice trike, right? Like, it's got some cool features that I even don't see in a lot of others. That rear basket is really cool. It's got these wings on either side that make sort of a flatbed. So you've got a big cargo basket. I've got my backpack in it there. Or if you want to carry something bigger, you can just lay it across the top. And, you know, like, I'm not saying you should carry a washing machine, but you probably could if you strapped it onto that thing the right way. It also has a tailgate in the back of the basket, so it folds down. So if you're taking something heavy, you don't have to lift it up as high to get over that big basket wall. You can just like drop the tailgate and slide something right into it. A lot of the other features you'll find on lots of trikes. You know, it's got that super comfortable, like, captain's chair saddle. It's got the front suspension, though it's you know, nothing to write home about. It's pretty cheap suspension. Here you can see that, like, I can off-road it if you consider, like, you know, riding through a fairly smooth grassy field off-roading. but it's not necessarily like designed for it. It does have front suspension. It does have 3-inch fat tires, or those might be 4-inch. So, it's got some cushioning if you did want to take it on like a, a nature trail or like a fairly smooth gravel trail and you slow down. But, pound for pound, it's the fully capable electric trike for like 1,200-1,300 bucks. So, you cut some corners, you make some few small sacrifices, but you do get a couple of neat things. Now, I will say that, Viribus, it seems like a fine product, but I don't know anything about their long-term viability, right? Like, with companies like Electrek, Aventon, these are bigger companies. They've been around for many years. Here you can see I'm hauling 100 pounds of jackeries in the back of it. So like, didn't baby this thing. Like it can haul. So yeah, like, I generally recommend people go with a company that they know that has an existing reputation, and we have a fairly good indication that we know they're going to be around for a while. Of course, you can save several $100s by going with a newer company or a lesser known company, like in this case. But there are trade-offs, just like we talked about how there are trade-offs with getting the price down this low. So with everything in life, there are compromises to be made. And I think that this one had some interesting compromises to be able to get to such an affordable price. So to me, it was a pretty neat experience to try something a little more affordable, a little more budget, but still something that I would put, like my grandma on, kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's an interesting. Wait, you would put your grandma on it?
Well, I don't have any grandmas left, but if she was still around, I would
Right.
put my grandma on this.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I like about the trikes, is that it's almost like a mobility scooter, but in a way cooler form factor, and in a way more useful, I would say. Uh, Form, like, obviously you don't want to go 30 miles per hour on these things, or 20 even probably. But I just think it's a nice alternative. Like, if I was in the mobility scooter market, I would really consider. Um, do you have something going on over there sound wise?
I think the grounds crew are like
Oh,
weed whacking or something outside. Yeah,
all
let
right.
me mute while you're talking.
Yeah, so I just think the idea of having a trike as a replacement, or a temporary replacement for a mobility scooter, is a really nice alternative, especially with all this cargo carrying capability. You can keep the speed down, like grandma, or, for us older folks, mom, dad might not want, something so crazy, but having the ability to use something at night. Like, I don't know that you would be able to ride this thing around a Walmart, but to get around, to get to the friend's house, to go shopping, rather than having a mobility scooter, this thing seems like a much better solution to me. And, with the back on the seat, with the low, lifting your foot over the down tube isn't going to be too much of a hassle. You don't even have to, with the throttle there, you don't even have to pedal if you don't want to. It's just somewhere to put your feet. It's just for me, it's like a better mobility option. And I know there's a lot of people who use these things for, cargo stuff and all kinds of other uses, and that's great. But I think, like, where this thing really shines is like the Florida communities where it's flat, and you don't want a mobility scooter. You're not ready for that, part of your life yet. This is a nice option. I know, when I hit 85 or whatever, and I don't feel safe on a two-wheeled bike anymore, I think this is my option, or whatever replaces it in however many years.
Yeah, and I always say it makes a great family vehicle too. Like, you don't have to be older. It's a great addition to an e-bike stable if you can keep more than one e-bike around.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, cool. And what was the price on that one?
I think it's $12.99 if I'm not mistaken.
That's a great price. All right, moving on. LiveWire. We're getting a little bit bigger here. Slashes prices with extreme sales on electric motorcycles.
Yeah, this is kind of wild because LiveWire, it's Harley Davidson's electric motorcycle spinoff. They've made just incredible electric motorcycles for several years now. They always get rave reviews, but they're very expensive, and so they have not had very high sales volume, right? Like I think last quarter they sold several dozen, like very, very low volume for these things. Generally, the S2 line has been priced around 16 to 17,000, I want to say, but they've just launched this huge new promotion. It's called their Twist and Go promotion. So the S2 Del Mar is below $10,000. It's 9,999, which is an incredible price for what was like a $16,500 electric motorcycle. The S2 Mulholland and Alpinista, they're built on the same platform, slightly different ergonomics. Those are priced at $10,999 and $11,999. And so these are just significantly, significantly reduced prices. I have to imagine this is not LiveWire being altruistic, being like, we should really do something for those folks that can't afford these. Obviously, they're probably fairly overstocked considering the lower volume we're seeing. Like we talked about with Dahon, LiveWire is a public company, so we do actually get to see their books, see their sales volume, and we know that they're hurting. They're not selling the kind of volume that they had hoped to. They're probably not selling a volume that's sustainable right now. And so they've got a lot of motorcycles in inventory. I happen to be an S2 Del Mar owner. I have a Founders Edition. The thing is awesome. I'm super thrilled with it. I don't get to ride it as much as I would like, but it is an incredible bike. And if you read reviews from much of the motorcycling world, the two things that you'll generally hear is that this is a well-made, high-performance bike, and it's very expensive. And so those two things work against each other when it comes to LiveWire trying to penetrate further into the market. And so I think this is a chance for them to say, look, if our bikes were priced at something that people could afford, this is how they would move. And it's a chance to see, does that test out in the market. Now, at the same time, LiveWire has rolled out some smaller, like 150cc, 250cc equivalent prototypes that they've been working on. These are not, they're not concepts. They're said that they are going to be coming to production, but they're not at production yet. So a lot of people are saying that this new, what will probably be the S3 line, is something that could actually help LiveWire go more mainstream, actually hit the higher sales volume that they're going to need to be sustainable and profitable in the long term. We don't know anything about prices yet, but you have to imagine they're going to come in well under 5 figures. They're going to be lower than these like really, really good sale prices on the S2s. Obviously, their S3 line, we're talking about much slower performance. So probably something like 50, 55 miles an hour, like high urban speed, something you can take even potentially on like an urban highway for short hops, but not, an S2 that can go 105 miles an hour. It's not something like that. Also smaller ranges on their S3 line. It's not going to be like these that can do, 100 plus miles of city range, 50-ish something miles at highway speeds. So we're talking about smaller bikes with the next line, but a lot of people are still saying that could be the thing that suddenly, younger riders who are getting into electric motorcycles, especially people who started with electric bicycles and have been going up and up in power. Maybe they got a Sur-Ron and they want to go legal. So that could be the next step up, is something like the S3 line. So right now, I think LiveWire is just trying to get by with their S2s that they have in inventory. They're trying to move a lot of these things, but it's that upcoming S3 line that I think could really sort of set the stage for a potential turnaround from LiveWire. And I think it's fair to point out that they're not the only ones. That it doesn't appear that Zero is doing huge volume either. We know what happened with Energica, the Italian high-performance electric motorcycle company. It does appear they're going to be coming back after that bankruptcy. They got I think all of the IP and the production line and everything was purchased by some funders from Singapore, if I'm not mistaken. So, we don't know exactly what's happening yet, but it does appear they're trying to get that company back up and running. But the whole, high performance electric motorcycle market right now is hurting due to those higher prices. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens if suddenly you can get a $17,000 electric motorcycle for $10,000. If someone gets one of these, maybe we can go riding together.
Nice. Yeah. So, are there external factors like, tax credits going away? I guess not really, right?
Yeah, there was never a national tax credit for motorcycles, I don't think. Some states had them, I think like Massachusetts, California, etc. I don't think that they ever got, certainly not the $7,500
Right.
very generous car credit, which would have been like super useful for the for the electric motorcycle market,
Yeah, I would
which is
have
a
probably
shame.
6 of those.
Yeah, right. And these are the ones that actually, improve cities. They actually get cars off the road. They
Right.
actually like. Don't get me started. That's a whole other tangent.
Right.
next time.
How often do you ride yours? Is it like
So
often? Is it fun?
yeah, I keep it in Florida. So when I'm in the U.S., I ride it. I'm not based in Florida, so it's when I come to town, I get to. It's super fun.
So on
The
the
other
East
thing is
Coast
that
or West Coast?
on the East Coast, yeah,
Okay.
and it's one of those things that like distance makes the heart grow fonder. So like
Okay.
when I come into town, I get to ride it each time. It's like I get back on it, and it's this like rush again, which is kind of neat. But yeah, like I wish I had it with me in Tel Aviv, but LiveWire hasn't come to Tel Aviv yet. Harley's there, but LiveWire isn't.
That's interesting. You would think like with the electric world happening in Tel Aviv way ahead of the US that Harley would bring their electric stuff.
Yeah, and there are so many companies, like New, Gogoro,
Right.
Silence,
Maybe they're not
Vmoto.
competitive there, with the prices.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, Zero's there. Zero is doing like a huge portion of their like all their European sales. Israel's market is for Zero was lumped in with Europe, and like a
Mhm.
huge chunk of Europe's Zero sales was coming from Israel for a while. So like
Interesting.
there, like a lot of people want electric two wheelers, but yeah, it would be nice to see LiveWire come as well.
Yep. Interesting. I still like wonder if the Suron size bikes are kind of eating into that as well.
Yeah,
Those are quite popular, especially with the kids these days. So like buying a $3,000 or $4,000 Suron that can kind of make its way around urban environments at just under 50 miles per hour versus a $10,000. It's
absolutely.
and then Surons don't really require any kind of legal stuff, so I mean, they should, they kind of do, but nobody really spends the money on that stuff. So it makes it a
Yeah.
little easier, the insurance and registration and everything. All right, let's move on. Last story: Honda to unveil full-size electric motorcycle with fast charging this month.
Yeah, this one's really exciting because we're finally going to see a like true, honest to goodness, full size electric motorcycle from Honda. They've done lots of smaller bikes, they've done lots of scooters, they've electrified their Cub in certain variants in certain parts of the world, but now we're going to get a like Western audience intended full size street bike. We don't know a lot of the specs yet. One thing that we do now know is that it is going to have fast charging. We've seen that they've released pictures showing that CCS charger on it. So that's great because for a lot of people, the like, oh, I'd love to get an e-moto, but excuse is the like, yeah, but what if I want to do longer rides? Like it takes too long to charge. Well, not too many have fast charging. A lot of people are quick to bring up Energica. Once that was nice when Energica existed. Now they don't anymore. And so like the only major fast charging electric motorcycle is the LiveWire One, which is even more expensive than those other live wires we were just talking about, though they have slashed the price on that one as well. So this will be a major manufacturer's first full-size electric motorcycle, and the fact that it's fast charging is going to be huge for the market. Now, how fast is it going to go? How much is it going to weigh? How much battery? Like all these questions we don't have answers to yet. I apologize. I want to know super bad. As soon as we know, I will let you know because I'm like foaming at the mouth for more information here. Um, Honda's been sort of like dripping out details here. I'm guessing that they're going to wait until EICMA, the big yearly Milan motorcycle show. It's every November. I'm guessing they're going to wait until then to give us like the full specs that would make sense based on their yearly product launches. The other thing is that this is almost certainly going to be a Europe only launch in the beginning, though I have to imagine that at some point they're going to want to bring it to the US. Now, Europe's two-wheeler market is much, much larger than the US. It's just like not as big a part of the culture in the US. It's more like, a motorcycle touring as opposed to in Europe, the motorcycle is often seen as just like a normal everyday commuter vehicle. And so it's going to be a little while until North America gets these. But for the European market, it's going to, I think, be a significant competitor. Obviously, this depends on pricing, right? Like if it's priced too high, then it's not going to compete. But if Honda can nail the pricing, then suddenly you're going to have a significantly powerful option from a major manufacturer, a company that has service and support from dealers all over the place, not just something like Zero or LiveWire, which, yeah, they make nice bikes, but like, where do you go to get a service kind of thing, right? Like, you're a little bit limited. At least with LiveWire, you get all the Harley dealers, but still, like with Honda, like everyone knows what a Honda is. You meet the nicest people on a Honda, etc. So, they've got all of the legacy behind them, all of the servicing and support options, the brand identity, etc. So that is going to lend something huge to this in the market, especially for the folks that are sort of on the fence and are like, yeah, I'm kind of curious about electric motorcycle, but I don't really know if I should jump in. Seeing that Honda badge on there, I think, is going to move the needle for a lot of people. But like I said, we don't have real specs yet. We don't know what the pricing is. Those are the two most important things to decide whether or not this is actually going to be a success, or whether it's just going to become like a museum piece, as some expensive, low volume, kind of like neat, like niche product that never really made it. So hopefully we've got more information to share on that soon. I'm certainly waiting on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, those looks like a nice bike too. I like the mirrors. It looks like a nice form factor. Obviously, the one downside of electric motorcycles is range, so it'll be interesting to see how they address that. The battery bay looks quite large, but not, it's not going to be like a 10 kilowatt hour battery probably, but
I could see it potentially being that big.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the S2 has, I think, a 10.5 kilowatt hour.
Okay.
So the LiveWire, so I could see it being around that neighborhood. Like an Electrek.co always had the huge ones. They got up to like 20 kilowatt hours.
Oh,
but
wow.
I mean, those were, like 600-pound motorcycles or something. Like those, they were massive. So,
Right, basically just a battery with wheels at that point.
Yeah. So I could see this being in the 10 kilowatt hour range.
Okay.
Probably not too much more than that.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see the trade-off, and obviously with the fast charging, that helps. If you're trying to road trip with these things, and Europe's a little bit smaller than the U.S., so there's it's not smaller; it's just more densely packed than the U.S.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, if you're going at slow speeds, the aerodynamics isn't as big a play. It's something that Mike and I talk about a lot. Is that motorcycles are actually a lot less aerodynamic than you would imagine, especially at high speeds. Like a Toyota Prius will get much better gas mileage than a typical motorcycle, even though it's much bigger because of the aerodynamics factor. So all those things to consider. We'll obviously be very interested when more stuff comes out about this thing. I know I'm certainly interested as well.
Definitely.
All right. Let's head to the comments. There's tons. Thanks for jumping in there. You have some time now to enter some comments if you'd like. But let's go to Skeptic first. He's road tripping to Electrify Expo in Chicago this weekend. You guys going to have anyone there? Anything expected there that's newsworthy? The Electrify Expo typically doesn't have too much news in the EV world, and probably even less in the mobility space. But we will have our Joe Boras will be there. I think he might even be speaking. So definitely say hi to him if you're going to that. And yeah, it's a fun event. I've heard. I haven't been to one, but they're quite popular. Carl in San Diego, that simple boost bike folding is a great idea for getting a lot of bikes on trains or buses. That's a great point. Buses and trains are also very tightly packed, and having the two-dimensional factor is really nice.
Yeah, plus sometimes they'll have a rule that say that you can bring a folding bike but not a full-size bike, so you might be able to get away with saying, look, it folds.
Yeah. It also looks like a mini Velo undersized frame road bike. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. Maybe it's a model.
It only took 43 years for Dahon to go public. Hopefully they do well. Yeah, 43 years is quite a long time. The Dr. Dahon doesn't look 43 years plus whatever.
I guess he started young, but yeah.
All right, you're welcome for the content. You two are streaming at the same time as the Nintendo Direct. Oh my God. But I'm hanging y'all because you're more iconic duo than Mario and Luigi. All right, we'll take it.
Nice, thank you.
Before e-bikes, I would never have considered a 20-inch, but now that I have one, it's perfect and more reasonable than my 26 folder. Yeah, 26 folder is kind of a weird form factor because it folds up but it's still huge.
Yeah, and like it's still tall too because of big
Yeah.
wheels.
Yeah, it's hard to get into the car and all the other stuff. All right, Easy E. So glad I line in Indiana and not some big city. There's always some that ruin a good thing. I guess Indiana doesn't have quite as many.
Restrictive e-bike laws.
Right, they're kind of just like do your own thing. At this point, who has more nonsensical e-bike laws, California, New York, or the whole of Europe? That's a great question. I think we certainly hear about more New York and California ones.
Yeah, Europe's been a little more draconian for a while, so I guess people have gotten used to those.
Right. It was inevitable that New York City needs to get those non-compliant. Oh yeah, we talked about this during the show, but yeah, and obviously you can just order them on Amazon. Nobody's gonna send it to Westchester or whatever. All right, an interesting small folder concept, but how the handlebars lock might concern me. That is a concern. I know some of the folding bikes, especially on the low end, the handlebar lock is a little janky. Even on the scooters, that doesn't inspire confidence. That is something to consider.
Yeah, you never want to like turn the bars and have the wheel not turn as much as the bars.
Or have the wheel start turning and the bars don't turn.
Yeah.
All right. Stash D, the battery fire safety guy, covered banning e-bikes on subway and trains. Slippery slope. Sounds like /D is a battery doomsayer and quite annoying, according to one Mike Sprinzelis. So I don't know. Do you know Stash D? All right. It's not fair to snatch people's batteries when they have not provided an easy and affordable way for people to get their batteries replaced. If they're going to do this, government needs to foot the bill.
So they did have a program. I'm not sure if it's still active or not, but there was a New York DOT program to replace delivery riders, both I think the bikes and also they had a battery program to replace them with UL compliant. So I agree with what Extra Hero was saying. Is like a pretty significant undertaking for someone to be forced to replace their vehicle, but there have been programs to make it affordable and to help them with that funding to replace those parts.
All right. There's also power of education that New York City has gone through. I think we talked about that as a component of the safety. It took a while for everyone to realize burning their apartment down is avoidable if they don't jerry-rig chargers or use incompatible battery. And yeah, that's the thing. The charging was oftentimes the problem.
Yeah, the charging and the cheap battery repair. Like you take it to the guy in the back of the bodega that like your cousin knows fixes batteries, kind of thing. And
right.
Yeah. So
and also slices deli meat and
on the same machine.
On the same machine. All right. I'm in New York City and have some 8-year-old non-UL batteries. None of my batteries are UL, but I did research into the cells, BMS, and the makers. Yeah, I mean, if you have an older e-bike, like I don't think UL certification was even a thing 8 years ago. So
yeah, and especially if you have like a lithium iron phosphate, those last like years and years and years. So you could have a battery like literally from 8 years ago, and like your bike is still working with it.
All right. When a car drives around with a legal tent, the police don't shatter your car windows. I don't know if that's the same thing.
I get the point that like, they don't get up in your business for like one small violation, but yeah, again, like this is a tricky subject because there's a little more danger with the batteries than the tint, but yeah.
All right. Me gusta pan con queso. Wow, I like my bread with cheese. Do a review of the Dengfu Winnis E55 carbon fiber and super cheap. I like both of those adjectives, so maybe we'll take a look at those. I'm not a fan of the front hub motors, except as a second motor. I agree, front hub motors they make turning a little bit weird and the balance is weird. But on a trike, I feel like it's acceptable because you already don't have a great turning experience. You know what I mean?
It's also very situational dependent. Like flat ground, constant speed, you almost don't notice the difference.
Right.
Wet conditions, going up a hill, like turning with a powerful motor, definitely that's where like you notice it.
Right. And I mean, there's like the centripetal stuff happening and all the other stuff. So front motors, try to avoid them, but in this case, I think it's justified. Trikes are cool, at least more cool than giving up riding. That's
100%.
I'm here with you on that. LiveWire slashing prices to almost affordable. That's one way to look at it for sure. Electric motorcycles are just too expensive. I don't see selling neutered versions being the solution. I have to I keep coming back to the Suron thing. Like those things are just blowing up. Like I don't know if you follow Suronster at all, but he's a YouTuber. My kid is super into it. His friends are super into it. They're just like the new e-ride, and I'm just like I don't even know all these bikes, and they know more about them than I do. And so that part of the market, and of course, where do trends come from? They come from the kids usually. I feel like, and we know that Zero's got those they have two Suron e-bike.
The XE and XB, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yeah. They're kind of jumping into that world, although I don't think those are going to be homologated. They're just going to be dirt bikes.
Yeah, not in the US. In Europe they are, but not in the US.
So, I think that's where the future is. This very small form factor,
and that's the thing is,
things.
And I don't even see it as like a neutered version, so to speak, because it's for a different purpose, right? Like it's not these kids aren't trying to like commute on the highway, right? They're just looking for a fast bike, and that's the solution that they found. And so that's the market that I think that Zero saw and that LiveWire is looking at. It's not like a neutered LiveWire. It's for a different type of rider that wants a fast bike, but they also want it to be legal. Like most of the people who follow Suronster, like they don't care if it's legal or not. They want it to be cheap, which there's some validity to that argument. But there are other people who want to make sure that they can ride it every day, that they can get insurance if they need to, that they're not going to have a problem with the cops. And that's where companies like Zero and LiveWire and New, which has basically a street legal Suron as well, that's where they've come in and said, we can give you that performance, but we can do it like from the perspective of a motorcycle company that knows how to do it right. That's where they're coming from.
Yeah, and these kids and their parents, they do think about safety. And one of the things that I think the stress they have over e-bikes is that they go 20 or 28 miles per hour on the road, and these cars just these huge pickup trucks like whiz by them, and it's super scary. But if they can go 35, 40 miles per hour, then they're the one with the road. Nobody's passing them. They're kind of just acting like cars. I think that like it's counterintuitive. Like obviously speed kills, but in this case, I think they are scared of getting passed and scared of this stuff, and the extra speed gives them a little bit of comfort knowing that they're going with traffic and not traffic's driving around them. I know personally, I feel the same way. Like I'd much rather ride with traffic at 35 miles per hour than, have people honking and trying to pass me per hour. All right. Michael Sprinzella says fast charging could be a game changer for some riders. Yeah, I think, it's important. I don't know, game changer, I guess, for certain segments.
Yeah, it depends on your purpose.
Carl in San Diego brings up a good point. The U.S. is going to this much smaller NACs. The CCS looked monstrous on the was it the Honda?
The Honda?
Yeah. I mean that it takes up like half the
faux tank. Yeah.
Yeah, and like in the U.S., like where there's more Tesla chargers than everything else, so maybe the U.S. version of that thing will have a NACS. Hopefully, it does. You don't have to schlep around an adapter. Michael Sprinzella, electric range may not be the same issue with an MC that has fast charging. The small battery plus fast charging might make distances doable. That's a great point, as long as the batteries can fast charge. But smaller batteries are harder to fast charge. I mean, that's the thing about cars that allows them to fast charge is that they're charging quickly on the lower end of the spectrum, so you don't quite get that same capability with a small battery.
Yeah.
All right. Amazon won't ship non-UL batteries to my New York City address. Oh, good for Amazon. I'm sure AliExpress will. Suron is motorcycle-ish, and MC can handle highway speeds for more than a minute. What's an MC?
A motorcycle.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you get into like a little bit of gatekeeping on what a motorcycle is. This is, a little bit of debating semantics. Technically, a Sur-Ron is a motorcycle. A dirt bike is a motorcycle. A Vespa is a motorcycle. It's like, squares are rectangles, but rectangles aren't necessarily squares. But yeah, I mean, if colloquially we're considering motorcycles to be, highway capable vehicles, then yeah, Sur-Ron is not quite there.
yeah. And, to clarify, I didn't say that it wasn't a market for smaller, less powerful bikes. I just wouldn't call them a motorcycle. Obviously everybody's going to have a different definition. I would say that for around cities, around suburbs in particular, the Sur-Ron has definitely, and I say Sur-Ron, and I mean the 15 other bikes that are the same form factor, Talarias, all those things, they fill that niche pretty well. And, call them a motorcycle or not a motorcycle, moped, I think most people are just calling them Sur-Rons. Like they've become like the Kleenex of e-bike or whatever those things are.
Yeah, the genericide, like Escalator and things like that. Yeah,
Right.
that were once brand names and now are just a product.
Right. And yes, Sur-Ronster is probably doing that as much as anybody else. So.
Yeah, exactly. There are a bunch of companies that have lost their trademarks that way. Like Google for a while was like telling people to call it Google search, not like Googling something. Like they don't want to lose that trademark.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's the end of the comments. Thank you, everyone who tuned in, especially those of you who participated with us in the comments. We always love hearing what you have to say. It certainly adds a lot of fun and color to the show. We will be back here in another 2 weeks for the next episode of the Wheelie Podcast. We'll see you next time, everyone.